Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today I want to make a video that's going to be the opposite of the one that I did recently, which was I presented the arguments for ethno-nationalism. Now I'm going to present the arguments against ethno-nationalism. Basically, the YouTube video for the first one, which I'll put a link in the description below on whatever platform you're on, it got more viewership than the total subscriber number. So that means a lot of people who it wasn't meant for. So there was a lot of pushback in the comments. You can go read, and some people go like, my kid was sitting next to me, my oldest kid. He's like, Dad, they're writing whole books to you, And well, they're not writing them to me. They're writing them to, the community so that, they can educate you on why ethno-nationalism is so stupid. So here's the biggest argument that they have. It's the argument that, and it's very well documented in literature. Like I could write a book on why ethno-nationalism is stupid and it is a bad idea because it was never in history before. That's the argument they make. And I could cite hundreds of famous literary sources saying this in contemporary times or post-World War II times, we'll say, right? And the fact that there's a lot of literature on it and that I could quote a lot of people doesn't mean it's true, because there was a lot of really good literature saying that the COVID-19 vaccine prevented transmission. There was a ton of really good doctors who just completely sold out and lied about that, even though they eventually said they never even tested it to see if it prevented transmission. There's a ton of literature on global cooling back in the day when Leonard Nimoy talked about it. There's a lot of great literature right now on global warming. There's a lot of great literature on the Arctic ice receding, when in fact it's not. It's just growing at a less high rate than it was the previous year, but it's still growing. It's still increasing in size, but there's a lot of literature. I could write a book about it and show you how it's receding, even though you could just do a simple Google and that's false. So the fact that there's a lot of literature on this doesn't validate it at all. And basically the argument they make is this. They say prior to, and then they pick a period. We'll just say to be kind of fair, we'll say the interwar period between World War I and World War II. Prior to the interwar period, there was not this thing called nationalism. Nobody talked about it. It just wasn't really a thing, right? And you can change that time frame around to go pre-19th century if you want to, whatever you want to put. And then that's fact check true. And there was no talk of ethno-nationalism. Okay, fact check true. There was not a lot of writing about race because Gregor Mendel hadn't discovered Mendelian inheritance yet. So we didn't know a lot about race, right? Like the actual scientific parts of it. So, and that's fact check true. There was no talk of ethno-nationalism before that, and there was no talk of nationalism. So then they say, therefore, it did not exist prior to whatever period that they've established is the starting point for it, right? And that's the part that's just a complete lie. And they can cite hundreds of references of people saying this who are very smart. Doesn't make it true at all. So you don't have to have a term for something in order to be doing it. So basically, I could point to tons of very important, great countries of old who functioned as ethno-nationalist countries. They just didn't talk about it like that. But that they didn't talk about it doesn't mean they didn't do it. So everybody writes in the comments and says, hey, but this is how it's been for all eternity, right? They tell these really smart people this who are writing the books in the YouTube comments. And those people, you haven't read these books. Clearly, I have references, I have sources. But my eyes, I've read history. I've seen history, everybody function like this. No, you simpleton, because yours is a peasant. You can't understand their literary stuff. So basically, let's just look at some examples. You had, in Rome, you could only be a citizen of Rome if you were from the city of Rome. Like this wasn't, you were from the peninsula of Italy and you could be a Roman citizen. It wasn't like that. It was born of a Roman person of the city of Rome. And then later on, they went into the diversity is our strength thing. They ended up having a black emperor. Paul from the Bible was a Roman citizen, if you recall. And then what happened? Disintegration, of course, But they were at one point doing the ethno-nationalist thing. And that was when at the point where they were very successful. They were successful into the beginning of the diversity thing because you could still hold it together. But later, not so much. You look at, say, the Vikings coming and raiding the Isle of England. And they did that, just to loot them. But eventually they decided they want something more. So they made a treaty with the English and they got a plot of land for themselves. But when they did that, it's not like they were Englishmen. They were Norsemen with their own land, with their own ethnic group. They would trade, yeah, but they were distinct ethno-nationalistically, because their nation borders were the land that they were given. And the English knew the exact same thing. Eventually, the English betrayed them, and that whole story. But until that point, they functioned in an ethno-nationalist way. And you even look at the go back to the Romans, and they at one point they realized the problem that they're doing the diversity is our strength. So then they do the thing that all countries do, which is they offer bonuses to people who financial incentive to people who will Roman families who will have more children. We saw that in Adolf Hitler. We saw that in Viktor Orban today, where you're trying to save your group, because you've realized that the people came behind, the non-ethno-nationalist people have messed up your country so bad. So basically, and when I'm telling these stories, you know these stories, and you can think of 100 more stories. So I don't have to keep going, but you can even put them in the comments if you want. But we all know all these stories, but they tell you, no, peasant. No, I have hundreds of literary sources. They do have hundreds of literary sources. And they're right that nationalism wasn't a thing people said. Ethno-nationalism wasn't a thing people said, but it was a thing they practiced, right? And that's just clearly observable in history. And so the entire argument, though well-sourced that they make, is trash. Let's do a couple more arguments, right? There's a lot of ad hominem stuff in there. We'll just skip that because that's obviously nonsense. One of the arguments is that I don't know what I'm talking about, not because anything I said was wrong, but because this book is sitting right here. And I'm so stupid that Friedrich Nietzsche would not have gone for anything I said. He would not agree with anything I say. That's true, but that's not arguing against my argument that I made. This man lived in a different time, and he was a brilliant man, and he lived in a different time, and he absolutely despised the state, and he would despise what I'm saying, but he hadn't seen history between the time of his passing or his going insane and now. So he hadn't seen what communism had done. He hadn't seen the gains that National Socialism had made as far as restoring the family and getting rid of all of the communist type stuff in society. And so he lived in a different time. And he's a brilliant man. I still keep his book here, and he would disagree with me. But that doesn't negate my argument. Like, nobody in the comments to that previous one went and talked about the downsides of diversity episode that we did on that big study done in the United States that proves that diversity doesn't work. Because in order to defeat my argument when I give the argument for ethno-nationalism, you have to be able to debunk that study somehow. You have to disprove it. You have to, even the author spent 6 years, because he was a liberal, trying to find a way that he could twist and spin it before he put it out there, and he just couldn't. It was just so damning. So another thing they say is, well, if you're an ethno-nationalist, well, that makes you a racist. I don't really care what you call me. If you say ethno-nationalism works, and if you say it's worked for all time, in history, every time that they went to diversity is our strength, they crumbled and collapsed. We're doing diversity is our strength now. We're having all types of problems. We got a study saying it doesn't work on every social level. It lowers the quality of life in the high trust society, and we lose all of that. And then if they say, well, so if you choose the thing that works, or one of the things that work, because I'm never claiming that it's the only thing that works. I'm just claiming that it is a thing that works. And then they say, hey, well, we're just going to call you a name. I'm totally fine with that. I'll take it. If I'm supporting the thing that works, I'm totally cool with that. And I will not call you a racist if you're a diversity as a strength person. But you're doing something that absolutely doesn't work, and it's scientifically proven not to work. So another argument that they make in the comments on that YouTube video is they say, well, just go take an ethnic test, figure out which ethnicity you are, and go back to that European country. So this is not a valid argument against ethno-nationalism, clearly, but it is a valid argument against me proposing ethno-nationalism. Because if you're a German, like a real ethnic German, and you say Germany is for Germans, it's a given. You know what I mean? Now, I do want to address it, though, because I am an American, and this is not my country from where my ancestors came from. This is the Native Americans' land, obviously. So basically, there's a couple different ways you could talk about this. Like, you can't go back and give land back thousands and thousands of years ago, like Israel's trying to do in Palestine, right? So, for example, my people are Hungarians, but Hungarians didn't come from Hungary. Hungarian is not a European language. As with the Basques, they have separate developments, and it's a Ugric language, I believe. And the Hungarians of today are the original inhabitants of Finland. So do the Hungarians have to go back to Finland, or do they kind of keep it? Because they kind of built this, like everything there, the castles, everything there is this people who's there now. So when you're talking about a white American, talking about ethno-nationalism, and you say, go back to where you came from, everything here was built by immigrants, not by Native Americans, basically. Now, Native Americans have done some stuff now, and I think they should be treated very fairly, and I don't think they should be like forced to leave the land or anything like that. I think they should be treated better than they're being treated now. But to tell the people who created a civilization over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years, in Hungary's case, over 1,000 years, I think it's not a valid argument. I get that the information that I'm presenting is invoking some rage in them, and therefore they're just saying, hey, no, you go back. But there is some validity to it, but I don't think it's valid at all. Like I don't think it passes muster. A better argument here for them, in my opinion, would be, say, if it was a Black American descendant of slaves and they were making the comment to me and saying, hey, go back. Well, probably they don't want to go back either, because the Africans of Africa have treated repatriated Black Americans poorly, like very poorly. And so their better comeback would be like, hey, well, we don't want anything to do with you, so the Black people become ethno-nationalists, but you got to give us a chunk. You can't take the whole thing, because our ancestors have been here as long as or longer than yours, depending on their ancestral history and whether it was tracked or not. So that they would have a valid argument there, but it wouldn't invalidate ethnic nationalism at all. Anyways, so those are the main arguments against ethno-nationalism, and they're tricky because I've read some of the books that they're citing on the on all that literature, and they sound really scholarly, and these people are famous, but the problem is you just look at history and it's obviously untrue. Because basically after World War II, they got together and said, hey, scholars and stuff, and said, hey, how are we going to spin this? Like, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to debunk the anthropometry that the Germans were doing during when Adolf Hitler was in power. We're going to debunk that, and we're going to use our Frankfurt School people to the anthropologists or whatever to disprove that, and then we're going to change the human rights charters, and we're just going to so they coordinatedly did something. That they coordinatedly do something and a bunch of people agree on it doesn't mean it's true if it's just observably false. Like a quick Google will tell you that they're lying, that the glaciers are receding when they're increasing less fast. It doesn't matter how much literature you produce on that. It's not gonna prove. Anyways, that's what I got for you. On Thursday, I'm doing an interesting episode on the Holocaust, because I'm actually going to show you the videos that disprove that the Auschwitz videos of liberation were true. They were actually staged, and got some hilarious ones for you where it's just so fake and staged that they're not even the ones that you see on the new special on Amazon, which I spotted at the hospital yesterday. And that's what made me want to make this episode. So that'll be on Thursday. Hope to see you there.